Leroy Darnell woke to the familiar creak of his modest brick house in Fayetteville settling under the weight of another humid morning. The air was thick with the scent of dew, soaked grass and distant pine, a reminder that even in suburbia, nature pressed close. At 67, Leroy moved with the deliberate precision of a man who had long ago learned that haste invited error. He slipped into his routine, black coffee brewed strong, a quick scan of the newspaper headlines on his kitchen table, and then out to the driveway to check his 2009 Chevy Impala. It was an old car, reliable in its simplicity, much like Leroy himself. But this morning, as he stepped onto the cracked concrete, something felt off. The rear driver's side tire sagged limp against the pavement, airless and defeated. He stood there, hands on hips, staring at the deflated rubber. This wasn't the first time. 3 incidents in quick succession, each one gnawing at the edges of coincidence. The first he had dismissed as a rogue nail from the endless roadwork snaking through town. The second, perhaps a faulty repair, but this third, he knelt, running calloused fingers along the tire's sidewall. The slit was too clean, too straight, a deliberate cut, not the jagged tear of debris or wear. Someone had done this intentionally, taking their time in the dead of night. Leroy's face remained impassive, a mask honed over decades of discipline. He didn't curse or fume. Anger was a luxury for those without control. Instead, he straightened, his dark eyes sweeping the quiet street. Neighbors' lawns manicured to uniformity, a few American flags fluttering lazily in the breeze, kids on bikes weaving between parked cars. Everything appeared normal, but Leroy knew better. Normalcy often hid the rot beneath. Without a word, he retreated into the house, grabbing a hand pump from the laundry room shelf cluttered with tools from another life. As he knelt again, pumping air into the tire with rhythmic efficiency, his next-door neighbor, Tyrell Martin, approached. Tyrell was younger, mid-30s, with a scruffy beard and the easy gait of a man who worked construction by day and tinkered with gadgets by night. He held his phone like a talisman, scratching at his chin as if debating his words. "Hey, Mr. Darnell, you got a second?" Tyrell asked, his voice laced with hesitation. Leroy paused, wiping sweat from his brow with a rag. "What's up?" Tyrell glanced around, then lowered his voice. "You know, I just installed that Ring cam last month. Right, caught my kids sneaking out that one time." Leroy nodded, a faint half-smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I remember." Tyrell chuckled nervously, then grew serious. "Well, it caught something else. Last night, around 2 in the morning. You might want to see this." He tapped the screen, and the grainy night vision footage loaded. Leroy leaned in, his expression unchanging as the video played. A squad car gliding to a silent stop in front of his house. A stocky white officer with a buzz cut emerged, glancing furtively before pulling a small knife from his pocket. He approached Leroy's Impala, jabbed the tire once, then again for good measure. Turning to his partner leaning against the car, he laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that carried even through the muted audio. They climbed back in and drove off as if it were routine. Tyrell watched Leroy's face. "You see it." Leroy handed the phone back calmly, clear as day. "That's Officer Chad Renner," Tyrell said, lowering his voice further. "Patrols this area most nights. I looked him up." Leroy nodded once, his jaw tight but his eyes steady. "I know who he is." Tyrell shifted uncomfortably. "You want me to send you the video? Already saved it." Leroy replied, turning back to the pump without another word. As Tyrell walked away, Leroy finished inflating the tire and retreated to his garage. The space was a sanctuary of order, tools hung precisely on pegboards, an old workbench scarred from years of use. He sat on the stool, the same one where he'd once disassembled M4 rifles and cleaned sidearms under the harsh lights of forward operating bases. Reaching under the bench, he pulled out and weathered ammo box, its metal surface dulled by time. Inside lay relics of his past life, a challenge coin from Task Force Green, a faded patch from Operation Gothic Serpent, and a black and white photo of 6 men in Desert Como, their faces blurred except for one, a younger Leroy, eyes fierce and unyielding. He picked up the patch, thumb tracing the embroidered edges. Memories flooded in, not in chaotic waves but in structured flashes. The blistering heat of Somali deserts, the crack of sniper fire in Afghan mountains, the silent tension of night raids where hesitation meant death. As Ghost 6 in Delta Force, Leroy had been the quiet enforcer, the one who fixed problems without fanfare. He didn't seek glory, he sought results. Closing the box, he felt a familiar resolve settle over him. Officer Renner had no idea what kind of man he targeted, but Leroy's long memory and longer list of receipts would ensure he found out. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the driveway as Leroy pondered his next move. He didn't rush. Patience was his greatest weapon, forged in ambushes and stakeouts where waiting meant survival. But this wasn't a battlefield overseas. This was home, where the enemies wore badges and hid behind authority. The casual arrogance in Renner's laugh gnawed at him, not because it was personal, but because it represented a deeper disrespect. Leroy had fought for a country that promised equality, only to return to subtle slights and systemic indifference. He decided to start small, gathering intel the way he always had, methodically. Slipping into jeans and a plain shirt, he walked 2 blocks to Marge's diner, the faded sign still reading Henderson's Grill. Despite years of ownership changes, the interior was a time capsule, chipped mugs, torn vinyl stools, the hum of an 80s radio station. Marge, with her perpetual apron and warm nod, greeted him as he slid into his usual end booth. "Morning, Leroy." "The usual," he nodded. 2 eggs over medium, turkey sausage, grits, coffee black. As she poured his coffee, Leroy's mind raced. The video was damning, but one piece of evidence wasn't enough. He needed a pattern, something irrefutable. Sipping the bitter brew, he replayed the footage mentally. Renner's smirk, the deliberate jab, the laughter. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a power play, a reminder of who held the reins in this town. By mid-morning, back home, Leroy pulled out a yellow legal pad and a blue pen, pools from his briefing days. He sketched a timeline, not of days, but of incidents compressed into his mind's eye. 3 flats, all precise, all on the same tire. Next, the footage, clear ID, laughter, squad car visible. He needed more. Prior complaints, connections. Picking up his phone, he dialed Gene Powell, a former tech sergeant now at the county records office in Raleigh. Gene owed him from '97, a favor etched in shared hardships. "Gene, it's Leroy. Need a favor? Name it." Gene replied without hesitation. "Chad Renner, Haywood County PD. Any complaints filed in the last 5 years?" Gene's voice dropped. "Give me a bit. I'll dig." Leroy hung up, his plan forming. Not violence, not revenge. Something quieter, more devastating, exposure. Meanwhile, he walked the neighborhood, engaging in casual chats disguised as small talk. Miss Alma mentioned her grandson's repeated pullovers. Jared at the auto shop spoke of smashed windows after a cop confrontation. The Johnson family recounted their daughter being followed home. Mental notes accumulated, painting a picture of targeted harassment. By noon, Gene called back. "Got something, but it's sensitive. Meet me." Leroy drove to Raleigh, the highway blurring as memories surfaced. Delta Ops where intel meant life or death. They met in a dim VFW bar, Jean sliding over a manila envelope. Inside, 5 complaints, all from black residents, all closed for insufficient evidence. Body searches without cause, slurs, escalations. Renner's name on each. These were buried. Jean whispered, had to go around the system. Leroy scanned them with precision, spotting the gaps, the cover-ups. Thanks, Jean. Back home, he cross-referenced with neighborhood stories, building a file. But he needed amplification, connecting with Dana, Tyrell's cousin, at a local non-profit. He shared snippets. Renner's names come up, she said, footage denied for malfunctions. Leroy requested copies, his folder thickening. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about the community worn down by low-grade intimidation. As afternoon shadows lengthened, he contacted Carla Bynes, a civil rights attorney. This is strong, she said after reviewing, could force questions. Leroy nodded inwardly. He wasn't scared, he'd seen ugly. But to make it count, he needed a voice. Alvin Reese, a journalist with integrity. Driving to Durham, folder in glove box, he met Alvin at his barbershop. Ghost 6. Alvin greeted. They pored over documents, Alvin making notes. This rots deep, Alvin said. You want it public, clean, with receipts, Leroy replied. As evening approached, Leroy returned home, the day's events compressing into a singular push. But one more piece, a confrontation. Knowing Renner's route from Patton's, he headed to the gas station on Glenwood Avenue. Pulling in, he filled up, eyes sharp. The cruiser arrived. Renner stepped out, stretching smugly. Their eyes met. You get that tire patched? Renner asked casually. Leroy locked gazes. You like jokes, officer? Renner's smile faded. Depends. Leroy leaned in. Ever hear about the man who thought poking tires was funny until the wrong one popped? Renner tilted his head. That's supposed to mean something. Leroy shrugged, walking away, leaving Renner unsettled. Back home, the folder complete. Leroy prepared for the storm. The day wasn't over. Resolution loomed. With the sun hanging high, casting a relentless glare over Fayetteville's streets, Leroy Darnell felt the weight of his gathered evidence like a rucksack from his Delta days. Heavy but necessary. The folder on his coffee table bulged with printouts, notes, and the manila envelope from Jean. But evidence alone wasn't action, it was ammunition. Leroy knew from countless ops that timing and precision turned intel into victory. He paced his den, the muted TV flickering ESPN reruns he ignored, his mind mapping the next steps. The video from Tyrell's cam was the spark. Now he needed to fan it into a blaze that exposed not just Renner, but the system shielding him. He started by deepening his neighborhood canvas, stepping out into the humid air where cicadas buzzed like distant gunfire. Walking block by block, he engaged neighbors with the subtlety of a recon scout. At Miss Alma's porch, adorned with hanging ferns, he leaned on the railing. Hot one today, he said casually. She fanned herself with a church bulletin. Sure is, Leroy. You hear about my grandson, pulled over 3 times this month. Looking suspicious, they said. Leroy nodded, filing it away. Same officer, Renner, she confirmed, her voice dropping. Boy's scared to drive now. Further down, at Jared's auto shop, the clang of tools provided cover. Jared wiped grease from his hands. Customer had windows smashed after arguing with a cop. Same cruiser as in that video you mentioned. Leroy's eyes sharpened. Pattern there. The Johnson family gathered on their stoop, shared their daughter's story of being followed home, reported it. Mrs. Johnson said bitterly, nothing done. By early afternoon, Leroy had 7 accounts, all pointing to Renner, escalations without cause, intimidation veiled as routine. Back home, he pinned them on a wall map, red threads connecting dots like enemy positions. Dana called, her voice sharp. "I've got transcripts from our tip line. 4 mentions of Renner, denied footage twice, equipment failure. Send them," Leroy said. The files arrived digitally. He printed them, adding to his dossier. Audio snippets played on his old laptop. Frightened voices describing late night stops. Children made to wait in the cold. Excuses flimsy as paper. One woman recounted sitting curbside with her kids while Renner checked plates for 15 minutes. Leroy marked each, his pen steady. This was targeted, not random. Harassment designed to erode, not explode. Contacting Carla Bynes again, he shared updates. "This builds a case," she said. "Pattern of discrimination. We can petition for review." Leroy agreed, but amplification was key. Alvin Reese was his next move. In the barbershop's back room, they dissected the file. Alvin's toothpick twirled as he read. "This ain't one bad apple, it's the barrel. Make it public," Leroy urged. "True, no spin." Alvin nodded, making calls. As shadows stretched, Leroy felt the day's urgency press, but confrontation loomed, personal, direct. Back at the gas station, the pump's hum masked his thoughts. Renner arrived, predictable as clockwork. The exchange was terse. Leroy's warning about poking the wrong tire. Renner's faltering smirk. "You think you're special," Renner scoffed. Leroy's response was steel. Tales of outwaiting snipers, holding breath under ice, navigating minefields. "You think I'm scared of you?" Renner stiffened, but Leroy walked away, the crack in the officer's armor visible. Home again, Leroy refined the file, weaving stories into a narrative unbreakable. Dana and Tyrell arrived, adding weight. "The town's stirring," Dana said. "More stories coming." Leroy nodded. The pattern was clear. Renner's actions, department's blindness. As evening deepened, Alvin texted, "Story ready, dropping soon." The article hit online, headlines slicing through the digital ether. Footage, patterns, Leroy's photo from Delta days. Shares exploded, comments flooded. Tyrell called, "It's blowing up." Leroy watched from his porch, the day's events culminating in exposure. But resolution beckoned, the confrontation's echo rippling outward. As the afternoon sun dipped toward the horizon, painting Fayetteville in golden hues, Leroy Darnell sensed the shift, the moment when gathered momentum became unstoppable force. The article Alvin had launched spread like wildfire through screens and conversations, the doorbell footage now a viral indictment. Leroy sat in his den, folder closed but mind active, replaying the day's cascade. Discovery, intel, confrontation, exposure. But justice wasn't a headline, it was accountability, and the day demanded closure. Calls poured in, Carla updating on petitions, Dana relaying new stories. 2 more families forward, she said. Voice memos, escalations. Leroy integrated them, his file now a weapon. The department responded online, allegations taken seriously. But words were hollow, action mattered. As dusk approached, the city council convened an emergency session, pressured by outrage. Leroy attended, not in blues but plain clothes, slipping into the packed chamber. Whispers hushed as he sat. The mayor's statement dripped platitudes, deep concern, investigations. Public comments opened, Dana first, then Tanisha Bell's tale of her son's stops. Voices rose, let the veteran speak. Leroy approached the podium, voice steady. I served 30 years for duty, expected the same here. He laid out facts, tire, footage, pattern, buried reports. He thought no consequences, but I don't stay quiet for wrong. The room erupted in stands and claps, but Leroy silenced them. What will you do? The council shifted, promising probes not just of Renner, but systems. Outside, Dana caught him. Powerful. Truth. Leroy replied. Back home, fallout accelerated. Follow-ups exposed vanished complaints, failed cams. The chief's conference, Renner suspended. Wesley Grant's interview, warnings ignored. Defenders faltered as stories flooded. Condescension, intimidation. By night, news flashed, Renner's resignation. Tyrell texted, boom, we did it, Leroy said, a gathering at the church. Coffee, cake, shared stories. A teen approached, you in Delta. Leroy's words on speaking up resonated. Later, a letter arrived, thanks from a saved soldier. Leroy tucked it away. A teacher invited him to class. He spoke of quiet battles, courage, a note from a kid, thanks for showing how to speak. On his porch, coffee in hand, Leroy reflected, not revenge, but legacy, voices raised, justice steady. The day ended with a neighborhood awakened, silence broken, people standing taller.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.